There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
Yes. Yeah, something sure is happening here, and what it is ain't exactly clear. And Retake Our Democracy in this radio show, in our blog, in our action alerts, and now with our new Zoominar series, we try and keep you informed so that you can be both motivated and educated to take an action right now. We really need people in the streets. We need people on the phones. We've got a lot of work to do. Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute radio show that airs at 8:30 a.m. every Saturday morning on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. And I'm the host of Retake Our Democracy, Paul Gibson. Last week, I interviewed Loveless Johnson III, and he's the co-founder of the New Mexico Alliance for Justice. We spoke about the recent protests at the Santa Fe Plaza and in Albuquerque, and as well as his plans to organize not just for police violence reform or police reform, but for other justice reform issues. He was a great interview, as he is also has a really varied background. He's an industrial hemp entrepreneur and also a radio broadcaster. So we got lots to talk about. You can listen and watch this interview and other shows by going to retakeourdemocracy.org, hovering over the homepage menu where it says Actions and Events, and then below that you will see Retake Zoominar series. And all of the Retake Zoominar series are recorded there. And you can also register for the coming Retake Our Democracy Zoom event, which is coming up on June 23rd. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Greg Mello. He's a founder and executive director of the Los Alamos Study Group. He's been the director since its inception in 1992. So he has been in this game for quite a long time and is one of the state's most well-informed and articulate experts on LANL operations, plutonium and nuclear weaponry. I'm eager to get started with Greg, but I need to remind our listeners of a couple of coming events and actions. Most immediately on Tuesday, June 23rd, from 6:30 to 8 p.m., we're going to have a conversation about the enormous benefits of forming a New Mexico State public bank, with public banking advocates and leadership and experts on public banking. On our panel will be Elaine Sullivan. She's the board president of the Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity. She's been in this also like for almost 10 years. So she's very knowledgeable on the subject. She was involved with Craig Barnes, who really initiated this effort. In fact, Craig's last public meeting was a meeting of myself and Roxanne and Elaine at the baking company. Angela Merkel will also be Merkert will also be on the call on the panel, and she's the executive director of New Mexico AFLEP. That's Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity. Melissa Pickett, also from New Mexico Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity, will also be on. And that organization is the organization that has been pushing public banking in the state for 10 years now. Joining them will be Paul Stull from the New Mexico Credit Union Association. And those folks had initially had second thoughts about public banking, but they've come around and they're strong endorsers now. And so he'll be on explaining why public banking can be good for lots of things, but for even for small banks and small community banks. We'll also have on that call Walt McCree, who is an expert from New Jersey and knows a good deal about what's going on nationally related to public banking. So I highly recommend your signing up for that blog, for that Zoominar. And again, you can go to Actions and Events and hover over it and go to the Zoominar series. On July 21st, we'll be hosting a panel with Kathleen Burke and Dick Mason, both from the fair districts for New Mexico. They'll be joined by 2 state senators, Democrat Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino and a Republican Senator Mark Moores. So that discussion will be fascinating because we'll be covering, the ins and outs of redistricting and why we need to do something substantive this time to eliminate gerrymandering. Some of the state legislative districts are just ridiculous. Not so much with the congressional districts. So that's both of those events coming up should be things you'll want to clue into. And you can get both information and registration information at retakeourdemocracy.org. Hover over the actions and events page, and lo and behold, you'll find Zoominar series, and you'll be able to register for these Zoominars. And so we're going to start our little conversation with Greg Mello now. Greg, welcome to the show.
Yes, glad to be here. Very glad.
Okay, so let's get started. I always like to start by just asking our guests to introduce themselves. And so you've been at what you're doing for a long time, but how did you get involved with this? And tell us just a bit about that, and maybe lift up your monitor just a little bit so that you're, or push it down, whatever, get your head in the middle there. All right.
Thank you.
Doesn't want to do it. That's okay.
There.
All right, let's get going.
Okay, thank you. Well, it just seemed very natural. I was very involved with science as a kid, and first chemistry, physics, math, and then science policy as an undergrad. And, I grew up partly in Livermore and hung out with Livermore scientists and their kids. And then later, after graduate school, I was involved in religious training for a long time. And of course, we grew up in the duck and cover era. We did not imagine that we would live to the age of 30. And so it was easy to, at the end of the Cold War, it was easy to see that this was an opportunity, and it felt like I had some responsibility to step up.
Okay. So before we get into the current challenge of opposing expansion of the number of plutonium pits at LANL, let's put this all kind of in context. Can you tell us about LANL's role in the development of the first nuclear bomb from 1942 to the present? And obviously, we don't have all day, so this is the Cliff Note version, or a created version for those who Cliff Notes. Go on.
So the Army came in 42, selected Los Alamos as the site. People came in the spring of 43, about the time during, more or less, beginning toward the end of the Battle of Stalingrad, to put it in context. So Los Alamos was starting up when the tide of World War II was changing. The theory of atomic bombs was somewhat well established at the beginning, or else Los Alamos wouldn't have been founded. Overall, about 2% of the Manhattan Project expenses were directed here to Los Alamos. It was thought that at first only 150 people would be necessary, but it actually turned out to be a harder problem and take a lot more people than they thought. So there was a housing crisis from the very beginning. Then they made pits there near where Ashley Pond is, just to the south of Ashley Pond today, and building D. Then D Prime, which is where we get our name for DP Road today. But in 46, the directors of the laboratory said that they did not want to do any manufacturing, that it wasn't safe and it wasn't the right place. So they put a letter out And that mission was taken away from LANL and sent first to Hanford and then in the early 50s to the Rocky Flats plant. I should clarify that this is an important, seemingly picky point, but Los Alamos doesn't actually have a pit production capability now. It is struggling to acquire one. So there's a difference between making a pit or two to support a testing program and actually making pits on an industrial basis, really at any level, but with enough reliability that you can actually plan your whole symphony of activities around the country based on what the pit production plant would produce. So LANL is currently undergoing a total makeover, if you will, at the cost of billions to get to pit number one. They haven't made a pit since 2011, and at the moment they can't. And they don't have a facility which is safe. They have a lot of serious problems, and the amount which is being authorized out of Senator Heinrich's committee just a couple of days ago, at the beginning of the week, was 1.1 billion at LANL alone to invest in this capability just for next year.
So can you just tell our listeners what a pit is?
Oh, thank you. A pit is the core of an atomic bomb, and it's a concentric shells of metal with and other materials with the fissile material plutonium in the middle. And as the central part of a Matryoshka doll, it implodes with a chemical high explosive, and that creates a nuclear reaction. And that's the first stage of a nuclear bomb.
Okay. So at LANL, do they actually do they actually assemble a bomb there before they test it? I kind of remember reading about how when they did this bomb at Trinity, they took parts down there and assembled. It wasn't as if they had some nuclear weapon that could explode at LANL. Can you talk about that?
Right, that's right. They had it all assembled except for the pit, pretty much all assembled, the pit and then detonators. They used to assemble nuclear devices at LANL and put them in a truck and take them to Nevada, but that's very dangerous. So they eventually stopped and built an assembly facility in Nevada.
Hazards of live radio. We just had a kind of an interruption here. And so we're going to have to rethread the conversation. And so Greg was just telling us about pit production, plutonium pit production, and how the Senator Heinrich's committee has decided that it'd be a great idea to give Los Alamos $1.1 billion to up its game and to be able to actually produce the pits so that they could manufacture bombs. Is that the point?
Yes, the pits would be shipped to Amarillo, Texas, and then manufactured into bombs there.
Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's easy to forget the bigger political aspect of this, which is so the pits are necessary to make new warheads. The new warheads are required by new missiles. The new missiles are part of the geopolitical competition with Russia and China.
Right.
And so that, it's like for want of a shoe, the horse was lost. The pits are a limiting factor in the nuclear arms race that we are currently engaged in, involving about a $2 trillion investment over the next 30 years. So 1.1 billion, at LANL just next year, but that investment is considered crucial in order to reestablish a production line for pits, which was shut down in 1989. And without those pits, the United States can't make atomic bombs except with reused pits, which are suboptimized for modern missiles. And actually, and this is not widely understood, I don't think, they are not a good fit for missiles which leave the atmosphere and come back. So for strategic missiles, you need, you pretty much need a new pit for
Okay.
each type.
So I guess your efforts to stall the pits is really a problem for the arms race people.
We are primarily a justice organization, as someone remarked early in our history in a kind of a like light bulb moment. So that's, we're very interested in the use of, in the predation of the military industrial complex on the priorities of the country, both the social priorities and the environmental priorities. And that is what is embodied at LANL. And that's what we would like to force a conversation about, a national conversation. And we in northern New Mexico have a unique and a uniquely powerful position to force that conversation.
Okay. So can you tell us a bit more about some of the prior battles you've had? You've been in this game for almost 30 years. You must have had some devastating losses and some big wins, or hopefully some big wins.
Yeah, well, it was after the Cold War, we were pretty much right that it was relatively easy to have successes because the rationale for a lot of the work that was taking place around the weapons complex was lost. Los Alamos lost about 1/3 of its nuclear weapon designers. Just they quit, retired, and the money wasn't there. We won various litigation under the National Environmental Policy Act and FOIA, civil rights. We were arrested handing out the Constitution by LANL. They didn't think that would be legal. And so, yes, there were a lot of successes along the way, many of them mediated through the news media in Congress. So, you know, you get a big article in the Christian Science Monitor and senators read it and say, what are we doing making these new weapons? We don't need this. I want you staff member to investigate this. So on the disappointments, I think that I'm disappointed. It took me a long time to become less naive. The efforts to distract, co-opt, blunt activism they have grown more sophisticated as the years have gone by. So in the beginning, it was relatively easy. Now it's relatively difficult. And we've got a budget for nuclear weapons that is increasing enormously, much more than we ever thought possible. And we are struggling right now with the same things that many others are struggling with, the democracy problem overall.
Mm-hmm. So I want to remind our listeners that they're listening to Retake Our Democracy on KSFR 101.1 FM. And I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy. I'm speaking with Greg Mello about his role in advocacy and, in opposition to the expansion of LANL operations and in the cleanup of the site. So I know the Los Alamos Study Group is focused on LANL, but do you also weigh in on other issues related to nuclear arms proliferation, for example, downwinders issues or Holtec, or even the recently identified leaks of radioactivity in the Rio Grande?
We work mostly on nuclear weapons issues, not just at LANL, but nationwide. used to spend a fair bit of time in Washington. I don't know where that's going right now.
Yeah.
Luck with that.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of time on Zoom or something. Um, the For reasons of bandwidth, we have to leave a lot of things off to the side. I used to be a professional environmental engineer. I worked on LANL cleanup for the environment department, but it's really a very big topic, and it is one that I don't feel that we can, here at the study group, we can influence very much. We have a lot more influence, strangely, over nuclear weapons policy over the past 15 years than I think we could have on cleanup.
Okay.
Everyone wants, in other words, everybody wants cleanup to one degree or another. Congress, our senators want cleanup. There's, a large group of people who are working on cleanup. And
Okay. So fighting these battles,
Must be exceedingly challenging, especially when historically the entire congressional delegation from New Mexico are firm advocates for anything LANL. What's up with that? I mean, I get that there are jobs involved, but is that really what it comes down to?
Yeah, well, a lot of times we just go around our delegation. We don't, there are variations in their support, and so they can be helpful in small ways, even if they are pinned down in big ways. But other senators and Congress people and committee staff and even people in the Trump administration can be helpful, and help come from surprising places. I suppose let me see here, made a little list of who actually does all this, and maybe we'll get that back to it later, but there's basically, I would say, about 5 groups in government, and they don't have so much to do with elected government, although partly. There's the good government people who are sort of the permanent bureaucracy, and they just want to do things well, not waste money, not do stupid stuff. The neocons, the contractors, liberal hawks, and then the largest body of all, which are passive people in Congress, in the administration, and of course elsewhere. So, the relative balance and placement of these people determines policy more than anything else, more than the regular pathways through the elected officials, you might say. So under Trump, starting in the late Obama administration, and then now more so under Trump, the neocons have moved, become more prominent and are more powerful, and there's less restraint. And so they are running the show by and large, and people like the director of the NNSA is more or less a figurehead, while other people pull the strings. And the good government people are, more in the background.
okay. It doesn't sound easy, that's for sure. Let's get down to the current issues at stake at LANL. As most of our listeners know, the feds are seeking to accelerate development of nuclear weapons, and with that, vastly expand LANL's role in that development. Can you tell us first, what exactly are they proposing? I know they got 1.1 billion, and they're proposing to add plutonium pits or capacity to develop them. How many, and what's next after that?
Yes. So as far as pits goes, they have a legal mandate to produce as many as possible. So that's the shape of that. At least 30 per year by 2026, but overall as many as possible. And they want to produce pits for a new warhead for the Air Force, that would go into production in 2030. So there is a race to produce pits for the Air Force by 2030. So they'll have a stockpile of pits to feed into the production line, and all the other parts would come in also to Texas, and they could all be put together, and they can't afford an interruption. So that's the number. What they would like to do is to, well, I think the biggest thing is that they're not saying. So they are supposed to have produced reports, detailed reports of exactly what they want to do, to answer your question. These reports are by and large not written, or else they, as someone said, they live in briefings and they don't actually become like a report that somebody could get. Congress didn't see them last year in time to approve the money for them. But so they did anyway because they did. But what we do know is that they would like to have a makeover of the main plutonium facility, of reuse an analytical laboratory they built as a heavier plutonium facility, a nuclear facility. It's a different category, which they could do by fiat or by variances. They want to build 21 acres of ancillary buildings, parking lots, cafeteria, to prepare for operating the production lines 24/7. So to start production at any level, really, about 20 pits per year, they feel they need to be operating around the clock. So that means a lot more people, a lot more facilities to handle the shift changes and the training. So all of that is part of the 1.1 billion. And then the waste management is a big part of this too. They have a liquid waste stream, which they need to keep investing in, and a solid waste stream, transuranic waste and low-level waste, which LANL is bursting at the seams in transuranic waste. And so that's a major problem, requires investment. And that's what all the money's for, all of that.
Okay. And I'm guessing that money is going to just fly through the rest of Congress now that it's gotten through the hearings with Senator Heinrich. And we'll talk more about that on our podcast.
We're also going to go into a whole lot more about, some of the myths about LANL, and some of the ways in which we can or could not transition it into other purposes. And so Greg will talk to us a bit about that. But first, we want to sign off for KSFR, but we also want to let Greg tell people how they can get in touch with him and his organization. Greg?
Sure. LASG.org is our website. I want to emphasize that money is not a completely done deal. It's authorized but not appropriated, and there's no environmental impact statement. So, and people can weigh in on this. We have provided vehicles to do that. So if you can see that on our website, or email me, gmello, that's MELLO, GMELLO at LASG.org.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg, and thank you for being with us on the show. Our listeners know this drill by now. We're going to pause for a minute, and then we're going to, and that'll be the show that airs on KSFR, and then we will be back for the podcast, and the podcast will be available at 9 o'clock, 9:30 on Saturday morning at retakeourdemocracy.org. And I would like to also remind our listeners that we have a Zoominar coming up on this coming Tuesday, June 23rd. And so it's really encourage you to tune in for that, because it's going to be a very, very interesting Zoominar on the prospects of getting a public bank in New Mexico. So again, thank you very much, Greg. And we'll be back next week, and we'll also be back for the
for the Zoominar next week as well. Talk to you soon. And by the miracle of podcast, we're back, and I'm speaking with Greg Mello. And Greg, you had just told us a little bit about how the process was in Congress in terms of getting money to this LANL thing, and it's still got to go through regulatory review and so forth. And you were referred to, an environmental impact study. My understanding is that that's been stalled a bit. So could you talk about that? And then just about, my assumption is that Donald Trump is, and the people who he's appointing to regulatory positions are not exactly going to be conducive or receptive, rather, to efforts to do an environmental impact study or anything else that delays things. Can you talk about that?
Certainly. So there isn't any regulatory structure at all, per se, in the nuclear weapons field. So there is a requirement for an environmental impact statement if someone enforces it, but it's a matter of subjective belief whether an environmental impact statement is needed. So the NNSA says so far no, but they haven't made a final decision on that. And so if our elected officials were to request one, it would be a great deal more likely that we would get one. In fact, we think that if the governor or either senator or Ben Ray Lujan, together with the candidates in CD3, were to demand an environmental impact statement for LANL and its $13 billion capital program, its plan to transfer, a possible transfer of 3,500 acres of national park quality land for development to support production, possible involvement in central Santa Fe through the Midtown project, possible construction off Highway 599 in Santa Fe, which is also being pursued by the city with conversations with LANL. There's a lot of things happening. Of course, not even talking about the possible bridge over the Rio Grande, which in the long run, not the short run, might be necessary should LANL go ahead and hire several thousand more people as they are planning to do. So, we think that all this together adds up to an overwhelming case for a site-wide EIS, not just pit production. And I should say that there are 20,000 drums of transuranic waste at LANL. Now you can see this from El Dorado all the way to Truchas. You can see the white tents there on the mesa. This was never designed to be in tents for decades. At the current rate of removal, for this fiscal year, it's an unusual year, it would take 333 years to get that waste off the hill. If you multiply that by a factor of 10, then 33 years. We still think that's an eternity. A lot of people are confused about whether there's a plan to get the waste that has already been put in drums and is waiting, whether there's a real plan to get that off the hill, and there isn't. And that's because the new waste anticipated to come from pit production gets first place in the limited number of trips to WIP that are available. Anyway, for all these reasons and many others, a site-wide environmental impact statement that makes the government conscious of what it's doing, instead of just the weapons people pushing their agenda and then the environmental people, with brooms and dustpans trying to clean up. That's about the power level that they have in the system. We need a site-wide environmental impact statement, and citizens could help make that happen. Local people could demand it, and our delegation is powerful enough to make it happen.
Well, it certainly sounds like there's enough reasons to do it. I'm just astonished that there isn't. I mean, I don't even understand remotely how they could say, development of nuclear weapons could theoretically pose an environmental encroachment of some sort, and we don't need to study it. I mean, it's just like, oh, don't get me started.
It really is a new Rocky Flats plant. And I think that there's a misconception about how small this is. We have on good authority, it's secondhand, but it's from NNSA, that there are about 2,000 people involved in pit production now. The lab wants to hire another 2,000. So that's well, NNSA wants it, it's published. So that's 4,000. That's more people than were working at Rocky Flats until about 1979, 1980. This is a big effort, and it's going to cost, in the long run, tens of billions of dollars, and it will make thousands upon thousands of nuclear waste. And it's really a permanent environmental and reputational commitment on the part of the greater Santa Fe area in northern New Mexico.
So, I mean, it just makes your skin crawl. But do you, looking into your crystal ball, it's looking increasingly like Donald Trump's going to be a one-term president. Praise be God. And I'm not even religious. But would a transition to Biden be much better for you? I mean, or do you anticipate that this is a train that's already down the tracks?
No, it is not a train that is already down the tracks. That is the key thing that people need to realize. The weapons complex has tried 6 or 7 times to do this before, and they've been thwarted by a combination of activism, internal, well, it all boils down to truth. They've been thwarted by truths that were inconvenient to their project. And the Institute for Defense Analyses has said which is a very, of course, defense-oriented think tank in Northern Virginia, that this project might fail. And it was certainly not going to succeed within the time frame that NNSA would like it to succeed, and therefore there needs to be some kind of backup plan. Well, but there's a lot of ironies here. I can't read at this point whether Biden, which is really, we're talking about a team of people really, would be better than Trump or worse than Trump, because initially the Trump administration did not want LANL to have this mission. Their reading, and again, this goes back to these factions in government. So they're within the NNSA that owns the site, there's long-term bureaucrats, engineers, experts. There are a lot of competent people at the staff level. They concluded that Los Alamos' plutonium facility was too old. It had inherent problems of safety, and it's not very big when the existing missions within the facility are taken into account. And there didn't seem to be any easy way. They poured over this for about 1.5 years, and they couldn't figure out a way to make that facility work. So they said the only 2 options that would work would be to build a bespoke or built-to-purpose pit facility at LANL, or use this very large, currently unused former facility for making plutonium, uranium mixed oxide fuel at the Savannah Riverside. And Los Alamos was not the fast way, not the cheap way, not the low risk way, not it's a smaller facility, so it would have less flexibility. So everything was pointing away from Los Alamos for pit production. But then the New Mexico delegation got involved, and they brought a lot of Democrats with them. So it ends up being that the Democrats are the ones pushing hardest for LANL, together with the Air Force that wants this warhead in 2030, and Livermore Lab that is designing the warhead for 2030, so that we're at a point now where Los Alamos is as they say, the production agency for Livermore Lab, the design agency. So the scientists are there, we're doing the dirty work, we're getting the waste, because Livermore is in the Bay Area, and so you can't have that there. It's also very seismic, much more than LANL. And so there's ironies. Where the light in this tangled mess comes from is that the warhead is very poorly supported by the good government people, or by logic and common sense. So there are other warheads that could be used. They're already there. But the Air Force wants this new thing. So, and Livermore Lab needs a Rhizolone-Detra for its morale, basically. And so there's that. And then the other thing is that as we here at the study group have been looking at ecological systems, I have for decades, my whole life, and since I was an undergrad. And we in the 2020s face a series of cascading crises, which we are now seeing the beginning of. We have all the desire to build a pit facility, especially in two places, as part of a $2 trillion commitment to nuclear weapons over 30 years, in the face of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid going a little bankrupt, the fiscal deficits we now have that are astronomical, the money printing, the climate catastrophe, which is really beginning to bite, the pandemic, which is not going away anytime soon and affects the whole world, the famines, the migration.
You can stop now, Greg.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but we think that they have to build all this, they have to have everything go reasonably okay. And above all, they need a quiescent, accepting, docile public that is tricked into thinking that a few jobs for a few people are better than healthcare for everyone, educational opportunities for everyone, climate mitigation to basically save the world. And so the question is whether we together will be able to wake up in time and make a powerful enough intervention to change our national security priorities enough for the good government people to finish the job and kill off some of the most stupid stuff, which includes pit production at LANL.
Well, I think our listeners might take some heart in seeing
How just we seem to have made a 180 in relation to police violence after the killing the murder of George Floyd. And, who would have thought Albuquerque would create a public safety department that will handle a third of the calls that the police department used to handle, and be handled by professionals in mediation and behavioral health and so forth. So, I guess sudden shifts are possible. And so maybe we need to get to the tipping point here. That's for sure. I understand that LANL is making like really Herculean efforts to get into the Midtown project. When I spoke to Mayor Weber about it, I said, you know, couldn't you just make it one of the terms of development that no office space could be leased to nuclear arms for the purposes of nuclear arms development? And he said that that's not legal. They can't discriminate between different kinds of. It's like office. Anybody can rent the office. And so,
No.
what is your comment on that? And how critical would it be to LANL's expansion to getting the office space in Santa Fe?
Well, the city can regulate a lot of things for public safety and welfare and morals. So the city doesn't allow strip joints next to elementary schools, regulates the hours of liquor stores. There's a lot of things that the city could do if the city would like to do it. We have some draft resolutions, 2 of them, sitting with city councilors. They haven't been acted upon. The city has passed formal resolutions opposing pit production, endorsing disarmament, and so forth. So now we have come to a proposed action by the city that goes against the city's formal actions of the past. So I don't really think that Mayor Weber is correct.
Okay, and how important would it be to slowing the LANL production out there if we were able to stop their involvement in Midtown project?
Well, there's Midtown, and then there's other places. Los Alamos County is very crowded, and in the sense that in terms of buildable area, in terms of housing, and within LANL itself, there's not that much buildable area, as the director and his deputy often say, because most of the land is canyons, and then you can't put a nuclear facility near fault or public. Anyway, you take away all the places you can't build, and there aren't too many left. So in terms of housing, it's especially critical, and in terms of congestion on the roads. So the role of Santa Fe in supporting expansion of LANL is crucial. And it doesn't, LANL at this scale, without a very supportive Santa Fe, doesn't really seem like a feasible alternative. There's too many problems. I mean, I suppose that the viewers know that LANL is larger, much larger in terms of dollars and in personnel than it has ever been, and it is expected to get much larger still. So it's not the LANL, you know, of our father's generation, let's say.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a vested interest for our listeners to get engaged, and maybe you can send me the resolutions you've got if you'd like us to kind of get people calling city councilors to say, hey, how about getting this on the docket?
I'll do that.
I hear from progressives is that what we should do with LANL is to just convert it or redirect its research to, you know, inventing things that relate to battery storage and relate to renewable energy transmission and generation, or any number of other things that might be a tad more pro-social and less encroaching on our environment than what they're currently up to. Wouldn't be hard. And so, I mean, but at the same time, I'm imagining that the engineers and physicists and stuff that are there are not trained in the same things that they would need to apply to that kind of technology. Can you talk about whether that's a reasonable possible transition?
This was something that we worked on for the first years of the study group. The laboratory had been involved in renewable energy projects under the Carter administration, somewhat heavily involved. Now, that was a kind of halcyon period there during détente in the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's, relatively speaking, there's problems. And we really wanted this to work out. And we interviewed a lot of people, read a lot of everybody's work on this, worked on it at Livermore Lab in California as well. And what we found was it is essentially impossible. So there's always, there can always be a few people on the fringes that do a little, work on a material science issue related to solar panels, let's say. But the problems are the location of LANL, its lack of support within a technological scientific matrix. So, most of the innovation in the country takes place in just really a few places, and none of them are in New Mexico. The closest one that has some possibility is Albuquerque. If you were talking about converting UNM to a battery technology, or let's say, or building one at UNM or something like that, that would be feasible. And Sandia is actually a lot closer to the real world than LANL, both because of the nature of the laboratory and the people who work there. Physics is, especially at astronomical temperatures and pressures, is very different. Now, not everybody is a physicist at LANL, but there's a formidable barrier created by the nuclear materials that are there and the security that's there. So LANL's really going the other way. The laboratory feels, and the NNSA, DOE, that it's imperative to really raise the security level at LANL. It's a very insecure place. And they want to move as much, well, they want to have a hard perimeter, let's put it that way. And it's too far from the airport, and it's too far from other similar activities that there can be a give and take, a technology cluster, you could say. And that's the basic problem. It's not really convertible.
Okay. So I always like to ask.
It could be.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what Los Alamos could be very well is, and it is actually developing to a degree into this, is a very nice place for people to retire to. It's a quite decent retirement community. We know various people who are doing that.
With a nice view of the white tents on the hill.
Can't see them from Los Alamos.
Okay. I always like to ask my guests the next two questions. The first is that
one of Retake's abiding assumptions is that the systems that created the chaos we're in right now are not ideally suited to fix the chaos. That we need to invent new systems. We need to invent new institutions even, and certainly need a shift in our mindset. To what degree, what would a radical transition look like to you? What would a good new normal look like?
Mm-hmm. I think it would be, first phrase that comes to mind is simple living and high thinking. The old New England version of that was opposite, high thinking, simple living. But I had an activist mentor in the early 70s, and on his desk there was some little desk ornament or something said, "I have seen the past and it worked." I'm not sure the past will work exactly too well right now.
Right.
And I'm afraid we're in the soup in a lot of ways. But simple living and high thinking is a good formula. We're going to hit the ground pretty hard, and I don't know if there's a new normal available, but for us, we can affect the choices. I mean, we can affect the outcomes, and we have choices that will make us better people or not, and we can save species and people and civilizational values through the harrowing times that are virtually certain to come.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice segue into the last question. And given all of that craziness and what is likely to come, and 2020 has certainly been an insane year. Are you optimistic for our future? And if so, what do you see in our crystal ball for November?
Well, I'm not optimistic in the conventional sense that we used to have in the past age of history. The age we're entering is going to have a different definition of optimism, and we don't yet know what that is. I am optimistic for individuals and for our opportunities to serve and to deepen our understanding as we do so. So I don't think it's all bad by any means, but if we look in the old places for comfort, I think we're going to be disappointed. There's never been a time when there's not, more going on, so it's, quote, interesting. And I think that if we try to be as fully aware as we can of what is going on and reach out to each other, we can rightly say that we can be optimistic, and we can pull out of our general mass consumerism and the century of the self and begin really investing in the social contract and environmental contract, because we have very little choice now.
Right. It does seem to bring home. One of the things about COVID is made us realize that there are a lot of people who had been in our lives who were largely anonymous and who we largely took for granted. And suddenly these are now coined as essential workers. And it's too bad we didn't view them as essential people long before that, or honor them with the kinds of systems of justice that would, and I mean economic, social, and environmental justice that would have treated them like they were essential. So on that note, go ahead.
Yeah, can I say, we need that perspective, and we need everybody right now. It's kind of an all hands on deck moment. And we need to devise institutions rather quickly that value every person and understand that every person has an important role to play. We have to figure this out. We can't throw people away, which is what we do. And right now, especially when we're talking about reopening the economy, really right now, we need a Green New Deal in this state, a Green New Deal and more than a Green New Deal, so that we don't just put people back in the same jobs, which were essentially creating the climate catastrophe and the social inequity that we have. So
Right.
All the initiatives that you're working on will help with that. But I think we have resources here at the state level that we need to mobilize, because we're certainly not going to get it from the Trump administration.
Yeah. Well, no, that's for sure. So what do you think is going to happen on November 3rd?
I'm a really bad judge of this. I thought George W. Bush could never possibly be elected. And initially I thought that Donald Trump could never be elected. And so, but then Mrs. Clinton started saying the wrong things and something about deplorables. And we said, oh my God, it's over. It's over.
Yeah. Well, on that cheery note, we'll have to say goodbye. And thank you for joining me, Greg. It's been a very interesting hour. And I'll get off here and go fix this. For the people on the podcast, on the blog, I can be more candid. We had a phone call ring, and I had an alert on my computer that I forgot to switch off, and it crashed into the show. And so we had to pause for a while. And so I've got to doctor that up. So I apologize to our listeners if it was a little bit of a tweak in the middle of this, but I'll do my best. I'm not exactly a sound guy. So on that note, we'll say goodbye, and we'll be back next week. And thank you, Greg, very much.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Bye.